one point in the recent past, Chelsea had a striker and player issue in that they had a really good striker, but the player did not want to be there. Romelu Lukaku just didn't want to be in London. In fact, he wanted to be back in the north of Italy for a number of different reasons, which we may explore at another time, say on a podcast where you can do a bit more detail. But what we want to discuss in detail here is the possible deal that is on the table for A, Romelu Lukaku, and B, Dušan Vlahović, one of Europe's most promising young strikers. At one point, possibly not at the moment, but also possibly, there is a possibility that Chelsea were exploring the idea of Vlahović a couple of months ago anyway, as a kind of replacement for, well, Romelu Lukaku. What happened to this young kid? Do you know, like, I still love Lukaku, but what happened to this guy? Dušan Vlahović, step forward. He is a young Serb who currently plays for Juventus. Before, he played for Fiorentina. And just before Mauricio Pochettino was coming in, a lot of people were talking about the possibility that Chelsea were looking at Dušan Vlahović as a long-term prospect, shall we say. Since then, Pochettino has come in and, well, you're starting to wonder if the money's better spent elsewhere, mainly because you're looking at the team and thinking, the side's actually pretty good. Because when you put a team in the hands of the right manager and you pair those two things up and players start to look motivated, shall we say, and they are really creating a lot of chances per game, they're getting themselves into great positions, even if they're not scoring a lot of those opportunities, which maybe you need a striker for sometimes, then you start to think, hey, well, maybe we give this team a chance. But I think the thing that Arsenal fans are learning, the things that Liverpool fans learned a couple of years ago, the things that Manchester United fans have known for quite some time with a lot of big teams is options are great, and reliable and also top-class options that come at a premium are very important. Of course, at this point, people are saying, hey, well, Jackson plays in that position, and Nkunku can play in that position. We've got loads of people who have been scoring goals. Well, look at where Nkunku played at times, and sometimes not so much at times, for, well, RB. He came in for Werner in this side. Poulsen was the big guy up front, and Sabitzer on the other side. Imagine if he could play in a system just off a big guy. Same for Jackson. Jackson had somewhat of an interesting relationship, shall we say, with a number of different strikers at Villarreal. He could play alongside other people. Bring in Dušan Vlahović. Now, it's worth saying at this point that this is Nkunku's heat map, and this is Dušan Vlahovic's heat map. Quite different players. And you could probably do the same for Jackson as well. But the current trend in Europe is to go for one of these big guys. In fact, Højlund, Manchester United, Nunez for Liverpool, Kane, Bayern Munich / Spurs, Haaland, top scorer in the Premier League last season, well worth a look. And here's what's interesting about this, right? I mean, we look at, obviously, that is Nkunku's touch map. That's a really great touch map for a guy who plays in that position. This, Vlahović. This, Harry Kane. What I find so interesting about Vlahović is how concentrated his touches are. How we're basically looking at a guy who is asked to do such a specific role at Juventus that when we're asking him to, do new things in the Premier League, people don't actually know what they're asking him to do or what he is capable of in that sense. Look at Harry Kane's heat map. There is an expansion there of what Kane was capable of. This, my friends, is actually not Harry Kane recently. This is Harry Kane in more recent times, but under Mauricio Pochettino. Go a little bit further, and guess who else's heat map looks quite specifically focused, shall we say? When given a specific role, a lot of these number 9s, a lot of these guys who come in and give the team a clear identity, a clear goal, a clear place to aim, even if that isn't always the goal, even if that isn't always the aim, seem to be winning out at the moment. Look how incredibly concentrated Haaland's touches are between the posts, or at least within the 6-yard area. You don't really need to look at this, that's just kickoffs, right? But this area, I mean, maybe there is actually something there and that he's hitting the ball onto a KDB or something like that, and that's probably in this area as well. Go back to Vlahović. Look what it is that he's doing. If anything, a lot of these concentrations show how good he would be at this build-up play. This isn't kickoff, unless, of course, they're kicking off. But this isn't kickoff. That is. This isn't. All of these touches show that this guy has a capability. He is a big man that is capable within Europe, and I've been making the case for him for some time. Again, look at the evolution of both these guys. Haaland in 2022, this is the comparison with Vlahović. Of course, Haaland is the slightly big I don't want to say pentagram, but pentagon. And Vlahović is the slightly smaller one. Vlahović, maybe you would expect it to be slightly smaller. He's not performing at the same output as someone like Haaland. But as Haaland has gotten better and maybe elements of his pentagon have gotten slightly bigger, Vlahović has remained a lot more static. In fact, some of those numbers are actually slightly lower in this Juventus side. And that is down to what he's being asked to do. Just look at the heat map here. Vlahović is not the most progressed player, and yet he is still the number 9. That's not a concept that at this point in the Premier League or in any European league we're not used to seeing, but the people who go on the overlap are interesting with Juventus, and it's why I'm interested in seeing him at someone like Chelsea. That's Di Maria right there. Can you imagine Nkunku or Jackson, Mudryk just playing just off him? It's possible, especially if you think where Di Maria plays. Don't even need to just worry about if Di Maria, one of the world's best players, can play off him. Look at a Milik or someone like that. He also played just off a Dušan Vlahović. Can you see one of Chelsea, if not multiple of Chelsea's players, doing the overlap like we've seen in pre-season? This overlapping nature, being able to counter-attack, is incredibly important. On top of that, this was a game that I went to go and see earlier in the season, the Turin derby, Juventus versus Torino. It ended 4-2 to Juventus. Vlahović actually had quite a bad game in that game. I think he had one of the lowest player ratings. Pogba came back. It was a weird night, but it was still worth watching. And I was really taken by the young Serb on that night, or at least not so much taken as I want him at Liverpool, but taken as, hey, this kid's going to do something serious. Look at all the people overlapping. Look at where Cuadrado is. Look at where you can see just this in general. Everyone is working around Dušan Vlahović, showing that he can do something special in our league. Of course, we're not against, or we aren't unfamiliar with the idea of a big Serb up front in the Premier League. Some other leagues are, of course, and there was a headline that PSG were looking at Vlahović, and the PSG Ultras said, if you come here, we will cut off your 3 fingers. It's a fascinating comment. All I'm saying is you can Google it if you want to. But he therefore didn't go to PSG, and that probably would have been one of the preferred options for Juventus. PSG got a lot of money. They need a big man up front. Vlahović is young. There's a lot of things you can do with that. Of course, before I go into the tactical element of this, I just want to mention one thing. The curse of the number 9 at Chelsea is a real thing. Of course, there have been other number 9s, and there are other people who've done rather well in certain positions. This side of the map, don't care about it so much. I mean, Mattia Kesman was a decent player. Chris Sutton, of course, decent player. Boularus, not so much the guy that was the number 9. Numbers were getting weird. Steve Sidwell, numbers were also getting weird at that time. Franco De Santo, very promising young player. Actually went on to do relatively impressive things elsewhere. Just couldn't do them at Chelsea. Probably not big enough for the number 9 shirt at that point. Torres was more than big enough for the number 9 shirt. Came in. That's a goal every 4 games. Not Torres' return. Possibly. Possibly a curse is there. Radamel Falcao, that was a cursed shirt there. Alvaro Morata, that's not so much a cursed shirt, but he's, again, just a weird output. Gonzalo Higuain, weird output. Romelu Lukaku, a goal every 3 games. Not his highest output. Vlahović needs a manager who can look after him, and that is why I'm looking back at Mauricio Pochettino. Some people are saying the money is better spent elsewhere in this Chelsea squad, but believe me when I say that this team is becoming very well-rounded, and they've bought some very technically proficient players who are doing it for Mauricio Pochettino right now, which is why over here I've set up the tactics board, right? This is how I would play Chelsea if I had Vlahović in the side. Very promising young player, essentially plays as a centre-forward, but really you can see Nkunku or Jackson or even Mudryk or even Sterling providing or playing just off him. I think Sterling will probably be one of the players that will play just off him right there and provide into the box. You've got headers on the other end. Ben Chilwell is currently playing like this kind of a position. I'm not even kidding. Like that's kind of the Ben Chilwell position with these guys on the inside. And one player that Chelsea currently lack are, guess what? A big guy that they can play off. Now, I'm not saying that they therefore have to do this. It's a trend within the Premier League right now to bring up some of your backs, bring these guys over, and Colwell is playing this position out here. This ball out there. You can imagine Vlahović also being a great out. This is what Vlahović does very well. Gets into the middle there, chests the ball down, holds off a midfielder or a defender, brings one of these 2 guys into it very proficiently. These guys are not, they're very attacking fullbacks, but they're not left midfielders. They are wingbacks, right? But they operate in this way. It gives you so much latitude on a counter-attack to be able to get away. What did Harry Kane learn during the time that he was being Mauricio Pochettino's player and then in the 2 managers subsequently to be a deeper player, to have people play off him? It's what a lot of number 9s are now being asked to do. I'm not saying he's a quarterback type. What I'm saying is you can get him his back, the ball with his back to goal, and he will be able to distribute. Go watch some of the highlights online. I'm sure you'll be able to do that as well. With these other players like Enzo, Santos, Mudryk, Nkunku, Jackson, Sterling, there are other players, but obviously these are the guys I put in my lineup, and a Colwill and Thiago, and even Kepa, who's able to play in that back line and put some long balls out there. I think he adds more to this Chelsea side, is what I'm saying. Now, some people worry about his goal output. Some people worry about, hey, is he the kind of character that we want at Chelsea? I can't answer the character thing. I think, most players you have to kind of suck it and see, as they say in certain London clubs. But the point is that, especially with a young, promising striker who you're trying to get rid of another older, promising striker, someone with 7 years experience on him and doesn't want to be at your team anymore, why not take that risk? You've got huge resale value if you don't like him in the first place. You can then get back into the market, equal your books out, sell him onto another top side within Europe, sell him onto another Premier League side. There is a lot of value in the market for someone like a young Vlahović. And basically, it doesn't seem like a risk to Chelsea, but it does seem like the kind of thing that they could do, would do, and probably should do in this position. This, my friends, isn't a million miles away from the formation that Mauricio Pochettino played while he was at Spurs. I know that Chelsea fans don't want to go back to that memory of Spurs, but the point is that you can still achieve this level of football, a high level of football, without having to compromise on the other players' positions. I know we've enjoyed Jackson in pre-season really there, with Nkunku just behind him, or you could play, yeah. You see what I'm saying and doing with the names. I don't need to stress this anymore. I think Vlahović drops in here. That's why we saw his heat map there, and brings in a Chilwell, brings in a James, brings in an Enzo. There are so many great ball carriers within this side. There are so many players who are capable of doing so much more technically because they built a well-rounded technical team for Chelsea. It is worth saying at this point that they do already have another big young player in the team at the age of 21, stands at 1 m tall, is a very good player, doesn't really culturally mesh, should we say, with your boy Vlahović, because, well, he's Albanian. And Albanians and Serbs historically don't get along, especially when some of those people have said things which could be politically incendiary or upset certain people within the team. So this would be very much a political or playing signal, should we say, from Chelsea as to who they are backing within this. Vlahović is a little bit further on in his career. He has about 2 years on Armando Broja, and obviously Vlahović has already spent a lot of time in Serie A playing for one of the top sides in Juventus, Juventus is a huge institute, so I think it shows that he can stomach this level of play, should we say. I also think, obviously, there's a lot of people that don't understand the geography in that part of Europe. The sway, should we say, of a Juventus in especially Eastern Europe, towards the more Slavic states, is huge. Because, there have always been some great players for them, but also Italy, huge influence on that part of the world anyway. And so you can understand that when people say, oh, well, Vlahović could have gone to the Premier League and didn't. I think really the point is there, Juventus is a huge institute within Europe. Maybe we underestimate elements of its sway. Maybe we underestimate elements of what players want to do in their own career. And at the time, I think it was probably a decent move for him. He was voted Serie A Young Player of the Year not long before this. He'd done well for Fiorentina. He clearly wanted to put himself in the shop window. And he was a bit more of a striker for Fiorentina. Obviously, under a much more conservative manager at Juve, he's had a much more conservative role and his output hasn't quite been as good. I don't think he's been in the great positions that he needs to be. I think his confidence in his head has slightly changed and his confidence has dipped. All I'm saying is, development-wise, there is still something there for Dušan. I don't think it's healthy to compare an Albanian or Serb because you're probably going to get into a political area which a lot of people are just going to get angry about. And, again, everyone knows my feelings on that. He is a relatively complete striker. He is someone that Chelsea could do very well with. He is someone that I think broadly suits the Premier League profile, should we say. And with being pushed a little further to goal or even coming a little bit deeper, I think he impressed me, to be frank. He looks big, he looks strong because he is. And I think he's got the physical attributes to cope within the Premier League. It's kind of one of those thought experiments. It's like, look, he's not in a He's not in a formation at the moment that currently gets the best out of every aspect of him. But also when he's gone and played for Serbia, has he necessarily had the best aspects brought out of him there because of what he's had to compromise there at Serbia as well? It seems to me that this guy is the kind of guy who can get the best out of a lot of people because he puts round pegs in round holes. And maybe, just maybe, even though Chelsea have been purring at times in pre-season, although they haven't actually had the finishing touch, they need a finishing touch in that front line. We know that the midfield is currently being rebuilt. We know there are bids going in. We know, they need one more piece there. Possibly not, though. If this relationship between Enzo and Santos is anything to go on, then maybe you run with that for the season. Maybe you don't need to go out there and spend a whole load of cash. Is it value? Possibly. 45, 35 million on top of this guy? This guy doesn't want to be at your club. You've devalued him within the market, along with him obviously devaluing himself. You're not in a strong position. But like I said, resale value is there. I've made the case for Vlahović for quite some time now. I think you guys will be impressed with him if you get him. And I think that replacing someone like Lukaku is actually fairly small boots to fill in this current modern Chelsea era. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Would Pochettino suit him as manager? I certainly think he would. Would Vlahović suit Chelsea? Maybe just don't wear the number 9. Let me know down in the comments below. I know that there are some thoughts around his striking, whether he's got a high enough output, all those kind of things. Bring a guy in, give him an opportunity, and see what happens. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts, especially the guys who are big Broja fans out there, because I certainly am, and I'd love to see him operate in this position, but clearly Mauricio Pochettino hasn't been able to see him in that position yet, or, we won't see him in that position because maybe there's another position or another place for him. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you again here real soon on the Laurence McKenna channel. Subscription is just down there. Goodbye.